Hello, everybody. Welcome to another installation of Discuss Detroit, where we talk with local leaders, small business owners, and residents about our favorite city. And today, I'm really excited to have Meghanlata Gupta on from Indigenizing the News. So we're going to bring her on. Hello, did I pronounce? I should have double checked before. Meghanlata, is that correct?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, awesome. And so thank you so much for joining us. And I'm really, as we were talking before, I feel like we don't hear enough about the Indigenous history or current history and current peoples in the Detroit area. And that's something that we're actively trying to get the word out about more. And of course, you are also trying to do that, I think, through your new project, Indigenizing the News. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Why don't we start with tell us a little bit about yourself, your 2-minute life story.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, my name's Meghanlata Gupta. I'm Indian on my dad's side, so I'm Indian and Ojibwe. I'm from Ann Arbor, Michigan, but I'm a rising senior at Yale. So I've been going back and forth between Ann Arbor and New Haven for a few years now. Probably will be staying here for the fall semester, though. Um, yeah, so I'm a citizen of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians, which is located in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And so my work, my interests, my research, my personal work, it's really grounded in thinking really, critically and about Indigenous histories, about education, and about news media, which is where Indigenizing the News kind of came into play over the past year. And so, yeah, I'm just really excited to be here and talk about my experiences and, everything that you might like to talk about.
Great. So you're also at Bridge Detroit, which is a new journalism initiative here in the city. Do you want to talk tell people a little bit about Bridge Detroit? We did have Orlando on a few weeks ago, but many people might not have seen that. So tell us about Bridge and then how you got involved and what your role is there.
Yeah, so I did a summer internship with Bridge this past summer. So I did, I think, around 9 weeks, 8 weeks, 9 weeks there. And so Bridge is a nonprofit news source that runs out of the Center for Michigan, and it works to cover news in Michigan, a variety of news. And they recently expanded to create Bridge Detroit, which has this really amazing mission of having Detroit residents, writing on the news in their community and really, having the agency and feeling empowered to be talking about issues that directly affected their communities, which is something kind of evident in my own work and my own missions. So it's been really amazing to be able to collaborate with the Bridge team, get to know members of the Bridge Detroit team. And I've been covering tribal affairs for Bridge and sort of its kind of newer tribal affairs beat, and making more of an effort to cover Indigenous news, both on reservations for the 12 federally recognized tribes in Michigan, but also just urban Indigenous news and Indigenous news in general, personal news, everything like that.
Because it's so often not part of the quote unquote mainstream news, right? And I mean, we sometimes I feel like the term Main Street new, or mainstream news gets thrown around and beat on a lot. And I mean, there's a lot of great content, obviously, that is created by, I think, the Detroit Free Press and certainly, CNN and these types and New York Times and these what people would consider mainstream news. But there is a part that's missing, and a lot of that's budget cuts and for lots of reasons, but also just historically racist ideas about what is newsworthy, right? And so I mean, I was excited to see that Bridge Michigan was, I think I've always been impressed by their content. I was excited to see Bridge Detroit, especially with the newsroom that they've pulled together around Bridge Detroit, right? I mean, Stephen Henderson, Orlando Bailey, Luis Aguilar, all people that have been around a long time, and then to have newer voices, I think, is a really big part of it as well. And I'm excited to read more about what you've been writing. I'm going to pull up really quick, and this was before I even reached out to you about this article I had linked just from my personal Facebook page a while, just whenever I guess this was a couple of weeks ago, but debunking 10 misconceptions about Michigan's Native Americans that you wrote. What I can probably guess what led you to write it, and then and I highly recommend people go to bridgemi.com, and we'll put a link to in the post, also to this article, and in the video. But are there a couple of these misconceptions that are, I think these stats at the beginning is probably like the formative part, right? Just that people knowing that Native people still exist and that there's this many tribes.
Yeah, I think so, just the background of me wanting to write the article, just coming from, personal experience. A lot of my articles for Bridge, my stories for Bridge were a little bit more kind of like news and feature based. But this one, I really wanted to take a really kind of positive, or not positive, well, a little positive, kind of personal, and kind of thinking about what my like personal experiences were and some of the misconceptions that I saw, in among my peers and classmates, and just in general, like my communities, non-native communities. And so I came up with these like 10 kind of umbrella ideas, definitely not an exhaustive list. And everyone has different misconceptions that they've faced, but I talked a lot about how a lot of people don't really know that there's 12 federally recognized tribes in Michigan, and that these tribes are operating as sovereign nations. So they have, a government to government relationship with the state of Michigan and with the federal government. And so that plays a huge part into thinking about policy and, jurisdiction, and, has such a lasting impact, and people don't really seem to know about it. And so that was one of the huge parts that I really wanted to get across. And also that, all of these tribes and, Native people in general, like we're not constituting a singular group of people, but that all of our governments have different histories, oftentimes different cultures, different languages. And so this is what makes us unique, and this is what makes us, sovereign nations, is that we carry these very unique, distinct histories. We have different businesses. We have different, structures of governance. And so for people who do know we exist, there might be a misconception that we're all the same, but that's like so far from the truth.
Right. I mean, even just like some of these stats in the very first, right? So, I mean, that there's 100,000 Native Americans living in Michigan. And our state is one of the 10 with the highest Indigenous populations. I mean, that I think is very much news to a lot of people, unfortunately. And then, yeah, the 12 federally recognized in the state and 4 state recognized. And just the fact that in the United States, there's 574 federally recognized and 63 state recognized tribes. And then this kicker, and this is how and part of the reason why non-natives don't maybe know some of this, is that 87% of history textbooks failed to mention Native Americans after the year 1900. I mean, that's a staggering fact. I'm so glad you included that. I highly recommend people check out this article and read more about it. And it's so great you did all the links too, because you just want to know more and more and more and more. And you can, and it's really, really interesting. I listened to the NPR story on blood quantum that was just, mind-boggling. And I mean, if you really touch just really quick, because I mentioned it, but that myth that everybody can find in their DNA and just say, okay, so that happens a lot, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's kind of a, pervasive, I feel like, narrative that a lot of like Native people hear from like non-Native people, is like, oh, I'm Native too. Like my great great grandma was Cherokee, or like I have a little Native American blood in me too. So things like that, like, are often descended from this idea that was developed by the federal government called blood quantum, where, you know, you had a certain amount of native blood. Whoever was there at the, you know, the time that they counted, they were 100%, but their kids would be 50%. And their kids would be, you know, 25%, or like, you know, it turned into this kind of fractional, very kind of like, it's trying to quantify DNA in a way that, you know, many, you know, critical race theorists and scholars and scientists are saying, you know, race is such a social construct. It's not even real. And so, you know, we find blood quantum to be a very non-native way of talking about native existence. A lot of the ways that we think about indigeneity is often political, like being a citizen of a nation. And more than that, also, you know, affiliation and culture and family histories and stories and the way that anyone else might quantify themselves as being a member of a distinct culture or group or something like that. So it's much more than just, you know, DNA and, you know, how much blood you might have. So that's something that definitely I think is still kind of a notion that's in the United States, and something that, you know, I'm hoping to try to write back against.
Well, and a lot of it, you know, on the NPR story, they talked about a big part being that the United States government wanting to make it so that there would be less Native people, right? I mean, so if you use this version of quantifying, then eventually, I mean, if each generation gets a little less percentage, then eventually there's nobody left, and that was, you know, just another federal racist policy to kind of push natives to the fringes.
Yeah, and something too that, you know, we're engaging in more conversations about is the ways in which we can, you know, find shared lived experiences with Black communities right now, and thinking about how, in the sense of blood quantum, you know, the United States, you're right, didn't want Native Americans to exist, and really forced this very assimilationist strategy. At the other side, there's this kind of almost opposite way of working with Black communities, in which we see these, you know, one drop rules and Jim Crow laws, and ways to kind of propagate anti-Blackness and really codify slavery into, you know, federal law and state law. And so, in this way, I think there's a really big area for us to kind of talk more with Black communities and Black movements, and really center them as we think about our own as well. And that feels very particularly important right now as well.
Yes, there was another great article here about the solidarity between the Indigenous communities and the Black Lives Matter movement. And that's where this image, which I'll pull up separately, which has gone viral around the world, in, you know, that during a event in Detroit on July 4th. But we had taken down, the city had taken down the Columbus statue for obvious reasons, and long overdue. And then to see these amazing women, and we'll put Courtney Miller, Taya McGahee, Hadassah Greensky, and Joel Joyner, and then with this a photo that went viral by Rosa Maria Zamaron, and in the story here that on Bridge you have, you know, one Joelle Joyner talks about being both Black and Indigenous, and that's a really interesting. I mean, it would make sense that these communities would band together, and and this article is a really great example of that.
Yeah, I think it's really important, especially because you know, we can understand, you know, African American communities as descended from displaced Indigenous peoples themselves, from peoples indigenous to the African continent. But I think it's important for us to stand in solidarity, you know, as Indigenous people, standing with our black kin and our Black communities. And it's also at the same time important to recognize and unlearn anti-Blackness that's prevalent in our communities as well. Because we do have Black Indigenous community members. And in the past, you know, there have been movements that have, like many movements, you know, co-opted Black labor, Black rhetoric, you know, Black ideas, and not given enough credit to Black, you know, leaders who are organizing and really pushing for justice. And so I think now is a great time for Indigenous peoples to really, you know, as well as the rest of the world, to really unlearn anti-Black racism as well, and stand in solidarity, but also recognize there's a lot of work still to be done.
Absolutely. There's, I mean, reading a little bit about how, again, the federal government really pushed for that division, right? When there would be, when you were talking about the roles were made with the beginning of Blood Quantum, that Black Indigenous people were not counted, were not put on those roles. They were put in the other category, right? And so again, the government being proactive in separating and dividing people into these categories that, of course, are complete, nonsense.
Exactly.
And so on this, I'm going to go back to the site here, and this article. Sorry, I'm going to do this. But then from here, that takes us to the resurgence, and I'm going to attempt the word Wawiya Tanong Resurgence, which is Wawiya Tanong is the word, the Indigenous word for Detroit area before the Europeans arrived and named it Detroit. I've read that it could mean that it means, and that could be, this is just one reading it, but the crooked way, and then the Detroit River is really crooked right in this area. So maybe that is where that name came from or came on. But that this, and we're going to be talking to one of the members of this resurgence, Sacramento Knox, soon too, which I'm excited about, is a local artist in the Indigenous community. But this is a lot of information about the resistance, and this was the group that organized, I think, the event on July 4th. Is that right?
Yeah.
Were you, and could you talk a little bit about that event? I know you weren't able to be there, but I would just any thoughts or information you have, as I think you were writing a story about it.
Yeah. And I think this is where, the work that we're trying to do with Indigenizing the News, as well as a new kind of project that we came up with called the Meghanlata Journalism Project, which is bringing some Indigenous writers together, is just trying to allow Indigenous peoples to be defining their own stories and writing their own narratives. Because for so long, mainstream or non-native journalism has sought to cover native journalism and tribal affairs in a way that's kind of othering people and not allowing them to tell their own stories, relying so heavily on stereotypes that just aren't true. And so this event, this amazing event, was meant to be a resurgence and a reclamation of the area and of the land. And there was a ceremony, and it brought Black and Indigenous communities together. And as a journalist, attempting to cover this in a way that I want to really meaningfully represent what this is for, I think it really requires empowering a lot of the on the ground organizers to be the focus of the story. That this isn't some outsider looking in, but rather centering these organizers in being able to say, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. We're not, just going to be, reduced or categorized into some term, but rather, this is a long history of resistance and culture and beauty. And this is just one step in continuing that ongoing resistance.
Well, and you mentioned indigenizing the news, and we mentioned it obviously at the beginning. So let's talk a little bit about this amazing resource that you created, and I'll actually go ahead and make it the solo here. So talk to us a little bit about what it is, how you came to create it. You're now an entrepreneur. Is this your first foray into entrepreneurship or creating something? And what resources, or what was your journey to launching this amazing news source?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I had a fellowship last summer in Washington, D.C., and as part of the fellowship, we all had to produce a capstone project that dealt with some aspect of something we wanted to do in our communities, as well as we were kind of learning about history and politics in D.C. And so originally I was planning to do something a little bit more policy focused. But as I was kind of like learning and reading more and really reflecting on what I wanted to do, I realized, like, what me and you have been saying is so much of this is because of kind of a systematic underrepresentation of Indigenous lives and cultures and histories in the news media specifically, as well as education. So I figured that that was an area that I really wanted to focus on. And I wanted to kind of be able to provide a space where Native people and allies can kind of come and collectively learn and have some resources. So there's, monthly newsletters that I send out, and they're, centered around a certain theme. But there's also some original reporting. And lately I've been really working on trying to put up some kind of reading lists and like educational tools on the website. So stay tuned for that. Putting up some syllabi, things like that. So people can really advance their own learning and find like tangible places to start.
So great. And so then you started talking, I think, about is this the Michigaming Journalism Project?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the Michigaming Journalism Project kind of evolved out of these really beautiful conversations that, we had at Bridge, that we have, in Michigan in general, about how do we, provide a space for Indigenous journalists to really grow and thrive and learn journalism skills. And so the Traverse City Record Eagle graciously asked to, co-publish and join in this partnership with Indigenizing the News, where we're sponsoring Indigenous journalism, with fellowships, with stipends for Indigenous journalism, providing training, some guest speakers. They're going to be in the newsroom, so providing feedback on other stories. And really, we're just trying to work for, more journalism representation in Michigan. And so that's kind of where this project is coming out of. And it just started on July 1st. So it's very much in the beginning stages, but already we've received a lot of really positive feedback about it.
And so some of the articles that you already have, on Indigenizing the News, so are these, did you find some of, did you kind of say who wants to be a part of this, who wants to write for this? I mean, there's just amazing pieces on here already, and it just launched, you said, earlier this spring. Is that right?
Indigenizing the News has been around since June of 2019.
Okay, yeah,
it's been around for a year. The Michigaming project is very new, just started in July. But yeah, it's been a combination of, if someone I know is doing some work that I love, I'll be like, hey, do you want to just write a quick reflection on this for the website? But I've also had some people reach out to me and say, hey, I'd love to publish on your website. Can I write about this? And of course, I'm like, of course. And as you can see, I also published some press releases from tribal governments to kind of get the word out about what they're doing. I've done some poetry, film, definitions, book reviews. We've had some kind of politics-centered writing about missing and murdered Indigenous women. Yeah. Really kind of a variety of topics. I don't really turn anyone away. Just kind of want to get a lot of perspectives out there. And I've had some non-Native allies also reporting on this work, which I'm excited about because it is very rigorous and important work. And so, as long as people can do it meaningfully and appropriately, I welcome that.
Yeah. And so so as you talked about the fellowship, so is it a nonprofit, Indigenizing the News? Is it a business? We talk a lot in Detroit and with a lot of people about entrepreneurship and how it looks different. Like people think a lot of times that the word entrepreneurship, I know even when I first began and started the Detroit Experience Factory in 2006, and someone tried to call me an entrepreneur, I was like, no, it's a nonprofit, and I just want to tell Detroit stories and help, and so, and I think even in Detroiters, we talked with Build Institute, which does a lot of great classes and resources for entrepreneurs, but a lot of people think, oh, I'm just making, just the side business. I'm not an entrepreneur, but helping people realize that entrepreneurship is a really diverse title, and it's a different journey for everybody is kind of what I'm going to. So that's why I was just curious a little bit more about your the journey to creating something, and if there were any resources that you used or that you wish that existed along the way. And I know it's a continuing journey too. It's not just the end. I started something. It's sometimes actually even more difficult once you actually start something, and to grow it can be just as hard as launching something.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a 501c3 nonprofit yet. Right now it's kind of more of a platform and a network, but I'm hoping to incorporate it as, a nonprofit. And the best part is, like, through the Michigamming Journalism Project, we've been able to partner up with an Ojibwe housing kind of nonprofit. And so I've been able to really see kind of how Indigenous nonprofit work is being done. And so, it's been really great to see partnerships. I think that's a big part of entrepreneurship, and just, getting into this field in general is, thinking about what it means to kind of build relationships with others who are doing similar things. Just because, it doesn't always have to be something that's never been done before. And I think there's this sense that, like, oh, I want to do something that, like, no one's ever done ever. But the fact is, there's so many ways to empower each other and build networks when we're working on similar things, and we shouldn't all have to be doing that alone. We should join together.
Absolutely, collaboration is key for entrepreneurship, and I think especially in Detroit, in the area, and in I don't know how to say, in communities that care a little more. I mean, and I don't know very much about New York specifically, but when you think of like bigger cities, you think of this dog eat dog, and I've seen that reaction when people come to Detroit, and City Institute is all about sharing lessons learned from Detroit. And so when they've come here to learn from Detroit and meet with entrepreneurs, for example, they're always amazed. They're like, wait, you mean this restaurant? Like I had Godwin from Yum Village on, which is a great new restaurant, and then Mamba from Baba Fair, which is about to open, and they're going to be on the same block. And Mamba was talking about how Godwin let him use his kitchen, but because his wasn't ready yet to create, and it's like that's normal, and I think that may for Detroit, and I think it's why we have such a great small business community here. But other people are just like, what? I can't imagine being that collaborative with, the quote unquote competitors. But I think when your heart's in the right place and it's not about the money, I mean, people need money, and businesses, should and can make money. But when your heart's in the right place, collaboration, is good for everybody.
Exactly. And it's works against this very kind of individualist, kind of very American idea of just, the individual, that, is not often, I mean, that's not the best way, in my way, to go around. I'm really rooted in senses of community and kinship and togetherness. And so feels like a direct kind of, writing against that idea that we all have to do it alone.
Yeah, that's great. A couple just little questions that popped in my head was, you mentioned you're part of the tribe from Sault Ste. Marie, which is in the UP. So how does that mean? Did you used to live up there? Do you have to live there? And I apologize. I think I mentioned before, I don't really know much, and so I'm ready to learn. Please correct me as necessary or anything. But that was just one question that popped into my head, how that works with the geography of a tribe.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I'm a citizen of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians. And so my grandparents actually grew up in St. Agnes, which is Sault Ste. Marie tribe has land in Sault Ste. Marie, obviously, but they also have land in St. Agnes and a few other places. So reservation land, tribal land. So my grandparents grew up in St. Agnes, and they moved actually down to Livonia, Redford Township, actually. And so that's where my mom grew up, and that's where, I spent some early years of my life. But no, many tribal members don't live on reservations. You can still participate in community events, obviously, and still vote for tribal government. And so, yeah, like in the Sioux tribe, I think we have like 44,000 members, and I think we have about 11,000 living in kind of the service areas, and the rest are kind of, either in Michigan or, across the country. So, yeah, definitely don't have to live on the reservation.
Or nearby it. I guess I was thinking like you wouldn't, you don't have to be on the reservation, but you don't also have to be, you can be 4 hours away and still be a member, or anywhere really across the country. Just like if you lived in another, you were French and you lived in Germany or America, or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. No, it's a citizenship status, so it kind of carries with you. I have like a tribal ID card, and I have used that tribal ID card for the TSA. Actually, it's like a federal ID, or so in place of a driver's license, sometimes their passport, or for things like that. So I think that's where it really emphasizes the kind of political citizenship nature of also being a tribal member.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, again, non-natives don't, just don't necessarily realize that we're talking separate federal nations here, right? I mean, and including the TSA. That's really interesting. And if people want to learn more about anything, just start diving into Native and Indigenous information. Indigenizing the News is a great place to start with that. Another thing I wanted to really quick before we let you go, that we had briefly chatted about, was I love this link that you have on your, I gotta find it again, in your signature, where you can put in your address and
Oh, I think she might have froze. But I think what Jeanette was going to say was that there is a group called Native Land where you can put in your address, and it's kind of like an interactive map, so you can see the languages, the treaties, and the territories that that you're on. And so it's a really, really cool resource. And I will try to get the link and put it in the chat. But it's really interesting, and it kind of shows, another way that Native peoples are kind of reclaiming space and really defining their own narratives of, what languages and what treaties are still there, and what territories are still there. And so, yeah, it's a wonderful resource, and I advise all of you to check it out.
Thank you. Okay, so on that note, so what's your call to action for people? How can they help? What do you want people to do? Donate, say, anything? Just let us have it.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the calls to action for Indigenizing the News is just that, like, an education in these topics that we've all, that we just talked about. Like land and culture and language and tribal governments, like, an education in these topics is important for everyone. It's not just important for Native people, it's important for everyone, because it's rigorous scholarship. It's part of North America's history. It's something that's still very much a contemporary, growing, evolving, topic today. And so I think it's really important for everyone. So I would definitely advise subscribing to Indigenizing the News. We send out monthly newsletters. It's kind of a little bit magazine-esque, I guess I'm learning to kind of talk about it as.
Visuals are beautiful too.
Thank
you.
Yeah. And we do have a fundraiser for our Michigan journalism project. We raised enough. We were given a really generous donation for the first set of stipends, but we're also raising money to help keep the project going. And that fundraiser is actually on the Indigenizing the News website under the Michigan Journalism Project. And I also have a link for that I can share with you. But yeah, I think education is a huge driver of change. And so I encourage people, we have, this is a great time to become educated, to read, to watch, to listen, and really make it even a collective family effort as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's for children, you're in school and you learn third grade history. In third grade, you're learning about Michigan history, and you touch on that. But you touch on Native American history as in the state of Michigan. But I think for teachers out there, or for people, lots of people homeschooling lately, but for anyone educating children, to continue that beyond what's just in the textbook, and that idea to keep learning throughout your whole life. I mean, I love learning. It's my absolute favorite thing to do, and that's why I wanted to also then be able to share it with people when I learned something. Guess what, guys? We gotta do this. So we're actually going to do a short. We're doing these virtual tours, and we're going to do a short history on Friday around Indigenous history in the area, and it happens to be July 24th, which is the quote unquote founding of Detroit. At least
Oh, wow.
some people call it that. So when Cadillac landed here, when the Europeans arrived, and something that we're from now on, we're not going to celebrate Detroit's birthday in that way, right? Because obviously Native peoples have been here for thousands of years. 6,000 years is most estimates, with there's been archaeological digs in the area with 1,000-year-old pieces of community, and so really stressing that Detroit, this land didn't start existing in 1701, right?
Exactly. It wasn't discovered. It
Right.
was occupied.
Right. And that's really important. So that's been a learning journey for me and our organization that we're gonna continue to go down, and I really, really appreciate you being here and taking the time, and I appreciate you starting this great news organization so that other people can learn more. And obviously there's lots of other resources out there as well, and so this is a great opportunity, and I challenge everybody to learn something. Read the articles, go to Bridge Detroit, read the articles that she's written, and I guess you can read the other articles there too, because they really are really excellent pieces, and then as she mentioned, please donate to the project that's on the site, the Michigaming Project, and join us on for future conversations on Discuss Detroit and on future virtual tours, so that we can always just keep learning every day. Thank you so much, Meghanlata. We'll see you hopefully virtually soon. And when all of this, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation, obviously, what's going on with COVID and the crisis, both in the United States and throughout tribal lands. But there's articles about that on your site, so people can read about what's happening there. But hopefully when that's all done, or we get to meet each other in person and continue the conversation.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. And thanks everyone for listening.
All right. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.